The Willow Creek Harvest Festival was the heartbeat of autumn in the small Midwestern town. Golden leaves carpeted the streets, and the air buzzed with the scent of caramel apples and the hum of laughter. Susan Miller, the town's 27-year-old librarian, stood at the book fair booth, her arms full of novels and children's tales. With her warm smile and gentle demeanor, Susan was a fixture in Willow Creek, a woman who loved stories, nature, and the quiet rhythm of small-town life. But beneath her cheer, she nursed a tender wound, a recent betrayal by an ex-boyfriend that left her cautious about love. As she arranged the books, Susan's eyes drifted to a man hammering away at a nearby booth. He was tall, with dark hair and a steady focus, his hands moving with the precision of a craftsman. She admired how he worked alone, building the wooden structure from scratch. "Excuse me," she called, stepping closer. "Are you the one building all these booths?" The man looked up, wiping sweat from his brow with a calloused hand. "Yes, ma'am, Charlie Bennett, at your service." Susan smiled. "I'm Susan Miller, the librarian. I just wanted to thank you. The festival wouldn't feel the same without these booths." Charlie gave a small nod, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Just doing my job. If you need help with your booth, let me know." She hesitated, then seized the chance. "Actually, I could use a hand with the display tables. If you're free." Charlie set down his hammer and walked over. "Sure thing." As they worked side by side, Susan found herself drawn to his quiet strength. He spoke little, but his presence felt steady, like an anchor in a storm. They chatted about the festival, the crisp fall weather, and eventually their shared love for books. "I wouldn't have pegged you for a reader," Susan teased, handing him a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Charlie chuckled, a low, warm sound. "Looks can fool you. I like stories that stick with you, ones that make you think." Susan nodded, impressed. "Well, if you ever need a recommendation, you know where to find me." The afternoon slipped by, and by the time the festival lights dimmed, Susan felt a spark she hadn't expected. As the crowd thinned, Charlie offered to walk her home. "I'd like that," she said, her heart fluttering. Under a sky dotted with stars, they wandered through Willow Creek's quiet streets, sharing pieces of themselves. Susan learned Charlie, 31, had lost his parents young and was raised by his grandfather, a carpenter who taught him the trade. Charlie discovered Susan's passion for preserving the town's history through the library's archives. When they reached her doorstep, she turned to him. "Thanks for walking me home," she said. "I had a great time." "Me too," Charlie replied, his brown eyes soft. "Could we do this again sometime?" Susan smiled, hope blooming in her chest. "I'd like that very much." Their bond grew swiftly in the weeks that followed. Susan and Charlie became a familiar sight in Willow Creek, sharing milkshakes at the diner, hiking the wooded trails, or curling up in Susan's apartment to watch old movies. Charlie, a carpenter by trade, started dropping by the library, borrowing books and slipping handwritten notes between the pages for Susan to find. One October afternoon, they hiked to the old oak tree overlooking the town. The leaves glowed red and gold, and as they sat beneath the tree's sprawling branches, Susan rested her head on Charlie's shoulder. "I feel like I've known you forever," she murmured. Charlie wrapped an arm around her, his voice low. "Maybe we were meant to find each other." Their love deepened, but it wasn't without hurdles. Charlie's ex-girlfriend Laura breezed back into town, her charm and familiarity stirring old doubts in him. Laura was bold and persuasive, and for a fleeting moment Charlie wondered if he'd made the right choice. But after a late-night talk with Susan, her honesty cutting through his confusion, he knew where his heart lay. Susan faced her own challenge. Her older brother Mark, a protective mechanic who thought Charlie too reserved for his vibrant sister. Mark's skepticism stung, but Charlie won him over with small acts of kindness, fixing Mark's truck, showing up for family dinners, proving his love through deeds rather than words. By spring, Susan and Charlie were engaged. Their wedding was simple, held in the town square with daisies, Susan's favorite, woven into her hair. Charlie built a small house on the edge of Willow Creek, a labor of love with a porch swing and a garden out back. Life felt like a dream. The dream held until Susan turned 28. At first, the changes were small. Misplaced keys, forgotten appointments, the names of library regulars slipping her mind. She laughed them off, blaming a busy schedule or lack of sleep. Charlie noticed too, but chalked it up to stress. Then came the day she got lost. Driving back from a neighboring town, a route she knew by heart, Susan found herself on an unfamiliar road, the landscape blurring through tears. Panic gripped her, and she called Charlie, her voice trembling. "I don't know where I am," she sobbed. Charlie found her an hour later, parked on a gravel shoulder, her hands shaking. He pulled her into his arms, whispering, "You're safe now." But a knot of worry tightened in his chest. He insisted she see a doctor. After weeks of tests, scans, memory exercises, endless questions, the diagnosis landed like a thunderclap. Early onset Alzheimer's disease. Susan was 28 and her mind was betraying her. In their kitchen, Susan crumpled into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to lose everything," she whispered. "I'll lose us." Charlie knelt before her, taking her hands. "You won't lose me. We'll face this together. I'm not going anywhere." The dream held until Susan turned 28. At first, the changes were small. Misplaced keys, forgotten appointments, the names of library regulars slipping her mind. She laughed them off, blaming a busy schedule or lack of sleep. Charlie noticed too, but chalked it up to stress. Then came the day she got lost. Driving back from a neighboring town, a route she knew by heart, Susan found herself on an unfamiliar road, the landscape blurring through tears. Panic gripped her, and she called Charlie, her voice trembling. "I don't know where I am," she sobbed. Charlie found her an hour later, parked on a gravel shoulder, her hands shaking. He pulled her into his arms, whispering, "You're safe now." But a knot of worry tightened in his chest. He insisted she see a doctor. After weeks of tests, scans, memory exercises, endless questions, the diagnosis landed like a thunderclap: early onset Alzheimer's disease. Susan was 28, and her mind was betraying her. In their kitchen, Susan crumpled into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to lose everything," she whispered. "I'll lose us." Charlie knelt before her, taking her hands. "You won't lose me. We'll face this together. I'm not going anywhere." The disease crept forward, relentless. Susan's memory faltered, first in small gaps, then in gaping holes. She forgot their first anniversary, then Charlie's name. One morning, she woke convinced she was 19, asking for her college roommate. Charlie adapted with fierce determination. He labeled drawers and doors, set up a daily routine, and filled the house with photos and mementos. He turned their backyard into a garden, a safe haven with a winding path, daisy beds, and a bench under a willow tree. It was a place Susan could wander without fear. Willow Creek rallied around them. Emily, Susan's best friend since childhood, visited daily, reading aloud or sharing old stories. Neighbors dropped off casseroles, mowed the lawn, offered quiet support. Mark, once doubtful, became Charlie's rock, helping with repairs and sitting with Susan when Charlie needed a break. There were still good days. On those rare mornings when Susan's mind cleared, she'd recognize Charlie, and they'd dance in the living room to Unchained Melody, her head against his chest. Charlie clung to these moments, fragile as they were, but the bad days multiplied. Susan grew agitated, sometimes seeing Charlie as a stranger. "Who are you?" she'd demand, eyes wild with fear. Each time, Charlie's heart cracked, but he stayed calm, speaking softly, guiding her back with familiar tales or a gentle touch. One summer day, Charlie led Susan to the garden. She moved slowly now, her steps uncertain, but her face softened at the sight of the daisies. On the bench, he'd placed a wooden box he'd carved himself, filled with keepsakes. A train ticket from their first date, a pressed daisy from their wedding, a sketch of their house. Susan sat, her fingers brushing the items. For a moment, her gaze sharpened. "The train station," she said, holding the ticket. "Our first date. You built me a house." Charlie's breath caught. "Yes, Susan, that's right." She smiled, faint but radiant. "Thank you for loving me." He squeezed her hand, tears blurring his vision. But the lucidity slipped away, her eyes drifting back to the flowers, lost again. Charlie kept the box close after that, a lifeline to their past. He added to it notes she'd written him, a lock of her hair, knowing each piece held a fragment of her. By winter, Susan's decline steepened. She stopped speaking, her body frail, her mind a distant shore. Charlie couldn't manage alone anymore. With a breaking heart, he moved her to a care facility just outside town, a place with kind staff and a view of the woods. But he never left her side. Every day he brought daisies, read from To Kill a Mockingbird, or simply held her hand. One rainy afternoon, as he sat beside her, Susan stirred. Her eyes, clouded for months, found his. "Charlie," she whispered, voice a thread. "The train station. Our first date. You built me a house." Tears streamed down his face. "Yeah, Susan, that's right. I love you," she said, her smile a ghost of its former self. "I love you too," Charlie choked out, kissing her hand. That night, Susan slipped away in her sleep, peaceful at last. Charlie returned to their empty house, the silence deafening. He kept the memory box on the kitchen table, tracing its edges, grieving the woman who'd filled his world. Willow Creek mourned Susan with quiet reverence. The library dedicated a corner to her, a shelf of her favorite books, a plaque reading, "In loving memory of Susan Miller, whose light will never fade." The garden became her legacy, tended by Charlie and the town, a bloom of daisies each spring. Charlie lived on, scarred but steady. He'd sit in the garden feeling her in the breeze, the rustle of leaves. Alzheimer's had stolen her memories, but not their love. That endured, etched in train tickets and wooden hearts, a story no disease could erase.